During the time of Jesus, the words, "Follow me," would have been said only by a Jewish rabbi towards his prospective disciples. To understand that, we have to look at Jesus against the backdrop of his culture and his time. First of all, Jesus was a rabbi. He was a Jewish rabbi. That was part of God's plan for salvation for the whole world. And like other rabbis, Jesus also had disciples. He taught in a similar way to other rabbis and debated with other rabbis in a similar way. So if the people in the community would look at Jesus, they would immediately, from the way he taught and the way he drew disciples towards him, knew this is a rabbi. Actually, they went one step further and said this is a rabbi with authority. But there were a few very important things he did completely different from his contemporaries. The system of a rabbi and disciples fitted into the educational system in Galilee. Children started at a young age, learning how to read and write from the 5 books of Moses, very often learning the text by heart. Those who did not make it would join their parents in the family trade, building, farming, fishing. The bright ones could continue, and they studied the rest of the Old Testament as well as the interpretation of some of the famous rabbis. Now they were regarded as well educated and joined their families in the family trade. The very best of the best, at about the age of 12, could go to one of the prominent rabbis with authority and ask the question, "May I follow you?" After a long discussion, many questions, and even a trial period, the rabbi would have to be sure of one thing. Will this teenager be able to think like I do and do what I do? Then, and only then, would he make the invitation, "Follow me." All the others, the dropouts, would go fishing, farming, building, or whatever the family trade was. The custom was that prospective disciples would go to a senior rabbi and apply. It never happened that a rabbi was looking for disciples on his own. And that brings us to a very interesting question. What was the educational level of Jesus' disciples? We have some hints in the Bible. First of all, they were working on their father's boat, doing the menial dirty jobs of mending the nets. So they didn't have their own boats yet. Jesus calls them often "my children," and even little ones, just like a teacher would when he speaks about his class. In line with the custom of the day, they were most likely teenagers, with Peter the only one in his early 20s. That fits the picture. And in Acts we read that they were seen as uneducated. We do have information from the Gospels that the disciples could have been teenagers. Maybe it doesn't make so much of a difference, but it is interesting that in Matthew 17, verse 24 and the next verses, there was a question about whether Jesus and the disciples paid temple tax. Jesus instructed Peter to go and catch a fish. The coin in the fish's mouth, 4 drachma, was just enough to pay the tax for Jesus and Peter, and men only became liable to pay tax at the age of 20. So most likely, when Jesus said, "Go and pay the tax for me and you," singular, The others were not old enough yet to pay tax. This is corroborated by the early church fathers, who had it that John was the youngest and that he could have been even 9 or 10 years old at the time. And do you remember the two boisterous boys called the Sons of Thunder, when their mother came to visit Jesus and the group of disciples? She asked whether the one could sit on his left hand and the other one on his right hand in the position of honor when the kingdom of God is established. And that fits perfectly the picture of a mother coming to care for her young children. These are not old men with grey beards whose mother comes to intervene on their behalf. It's a mother speaking on behalf of her maybe teenager boys. So if we put all of this together, we get a very interesting picture that the disciples did not finish schooling. They could not apply to follow a rabbi. They couldn't choose their rabbi. Jesus chose them. And that is why they left everything and followed, putting their whole future in the hands of a strange rabbi that they knew little about then. So what does it mean to us? First of all, the disciples were quite ordinary people. They were not superheroes. They were just like us. They could have been, most likely, teenagers. Being disciples like them is no special feat, and making disciples like they did later is possible even for us. Jesus would make these unsuitable teenagers fishers of men, and today he still does the same. Now, right at the beginning, we said that there were some things that Jesus did completely the opposite from other rabbis of his time, including ordinary people as disciples. That was completely different and new. Actually, it was a sign of God's kingdom breaking through. As we read through the Gospel of Matthew, you will see that Jesus always included outsiders and rejected people in his disciple group. That means you and I can be disciples too. Now read with me. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come, follow me," Jesus said, "and I will make you fishers of men." At once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Now that brings us to 3 questions that I would like you to answer. First one. Why do you think was it so easy for the disciples to follow Jesus? Think about it. Second question. Is the invitation to them also applicable to us? And the third question. If they were teenagers, what does Jesus say about old men with grey beards like me? Can I also follow Jesus? What do you think?